So Hillsong's former pastor, Carl Lentz, Justin Bieber's former pastor that got caught in the scandal, well, he's back, but not in the way that you might think. No, he's not starting a new church, thank God for that. Instead, he and his wife started a podcast for people to be vulnerable and share the impact of their bad choices, the pain that their bad choices caused, and how God is bringing them through it. And in the first episode, they start with him, and I was struck by just how applicable the conversation was for all Christians, myself included. So let's start watching some of the clips, and I'll give my thoughts along the way.
I'm at fault. My decisions, my choices, that's my responsibility, and I take responsibility for it. We always have choice. We always have our own agency to do what we feel like we have to do. And I mismanaged my personal life. I hid things that I should not have hid. I lied about things I shouldn't have lied about. I was confused about who I was at times, didn't get any help for it. And the result was a whole lot of pain for a whole lot of people, which I will remain deeply sorry for the rest of my life. I don't live in the shame of it, but I'll never forget the impact that it had on people. And it's nobody else's fault. It's my fault.
All right, now first off, I'm glad that he took accountability for what he did. Even as the scandal broke, I respected the fact that he never tried to defend himself or make excuses for what he did. And another part that really struck me during this video was when they talked about not only how damaging this was for his wife, who of course did nothing wrong and had so many people slandering her because of it, but also the impact that it had on the lives of his kids.
Yeah. My kids are a mess.
Yeah.
And that was hard as a mum to watch, because you're like, you mother, you did this to our kids and to me. And so that was hard because I can't protect them from that. And I couldn't because it was so public.
I remember telling Charlie about what happened. And she said, thanks for telling me, Dad. I don't forgive you. And I don't know. Understandably, she's like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. And to give more context on Charlie's surrounding situation, she had a mental health breakdown that was so serious that we had to admit her into a hospital, mental health institution. And it was scary.
She was there for 8 weeks.
We almost lost her.
8 weeks?
We almost lost her. And so while all this is going on, that's in the background. And it was really hard, and we found out about everything that happened, and we called the hospital and said, hey, something's going to come out, and I want to tell my daughter, because not allowed to have contact with them except for twice a week, and I need to be able to tell my daughter now, because if someone in that hospital finds out, I don't want them to hear. I don't want her to hear from them. And so I remember this call with a therapist is on Zoom. Charlie's there, and I had to look across the screen and say, Charlie, there's some really, really bad news that's about to come out. And told her what I did and what had happened. And that's when she looked at me and she just was quiet. Remember, she was quiet? Mm-hmm. She was quiet and just said, thanks for telling me, Dad. I don't forgive you, though. Yeah. I don't forgive you. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you.
Yeah.
I said, I get that. Ava, who has a lot of your spirit, forgave me right away, hugged me and said, there's going to be a lot that comes from this, but Dad, I forgive you. And Roman, I don't know if he's ever vocalized yet that he has forgiven me. So this is a work in progress.
All right, now by hearing that, you might be wondering how something like this could happen. I mean, this man had to know that he was putting not only his family at risk, not only his ministry at risk, but also took the risk of damaging people's perspective and understanding of Christianity and God himself. But what happened here is a trap for all Christians in some sense. It's not like he started here. It probably started with people telling him how good he was at preaching, and it made him feel good about himself. And even with me being on YouTube, I see just how easily consistent compliments from people can puff you up. This has happened to me lots of times without me even realizing what was happening. When you're consistently getting compliments, you naturally start to internalize those comments as an indicator of how valuable you are. And this is one reason why so many pastors end up having affairs. I was listening to a pastor the other day, and he was talking about a counselor who primarily counsels pastors who ended up having affairs. And what this counselor found was not that something went wrong in these pastors' marriages. marriages, but instead they became so addicted to ego strokes that they needed their ego stroked more than their wives were able to give them. And so they sought out someone else for it. And I'm sure this isn't exclusive to just pastors. This can impact any marriage. So with that in mind, it makes sense to me how Carl could have ended up in a scandal like this. His value and his sense of self-worth came from the praise, and when this happens, you're bound to operate in the flesh and make terrible mistakes, leading to a very long and difficult path of restoration, which he also opened up about.
When you're in a situation where you have made mistakes, you have two options. You could point out the window and try to find other people that are more guilty, as guilty, and you feel that need to deflect blame, or you look in the mirror. And I feel like we've done the best job we can. I know I have worked really hard at staying in the mirror. What did I do? What's my responsibility? What's my role in this? What part in this story did I play? And I am so heavy throughout it that I don't have a lot of time anymore to worry about other people's role in the story. But what happened to our marriage and what happened to my platform, it was my fault and my responsibility, nobody else's.
All right, so he put it really well when he said that once you make a mistake, you have two options. You can either deflect the blame or you can look in the mirror. When we choose to deflect the blame, we're operating with our flesh in mind. Because when we're operating in the flesh, we're justifying ourselves by our flesh and how good we are. We're defensive because we're subconsciously fighting for a sense of self-worth and value. But if we look in the mirror and we operate with the gospel in mind, then we know that we have the ability to look at the deep, dark depths of our hearts. We can deal with our heart's darkest and ugliest truths because we don't have to hide those things from ourselves. We know that God knows every single thing that's wrong with us, and he loves us anyway. We have the courage to see our worst selves because we know that our value and standing before God doesn't depend on it. Instead, it depends on the life that he lived and offered to us in our place. But this doesn't mean that there isn't still work to do. If you've done something wrong as a Christian that you're ashamed of, and if you choose to look in the mirror rather than deflect, then you can start the restoration process of seeking forgiveness from God, then yourself, and then from others. First, you should confess your sins to God and seek his forgiveness, and after that, you need to work on forgiving yourself. You can do this by thinking about what you did, what you could have done differently, and then decide what to do differently next time. And if you can do that, then you can forgive yourself. And the next stage will be to make amends with those that you've hurt. Here's how Carl says that he's doing that now.
My job now is to make living amends. So as I've explained to you, when you wrong people and you hurt people and you offend people and you break the trust of people, if you're truly about owning what you did, you try to make amends. And I've done that where I can privately with the people that I feel like it's been appropriate. But when you're a public figure person and you've hurt people on a bigger scale, your whole life has to be a living amends. Yeah. And that's what I plan on doing. I can't go up to every single person that was a part of our beautiful church and say, I'm sorry to you. I can't do it. It's not possible. But I can live a life of integrity and honesty that gives people reason to believe and gives people reason to have hope. And nobody cares about what my words are when it comes to that. I don't care. You don't care what my words are. But if you're truly repentant and you're sorry about something, your words need to be said, but it'll change the way you think. And when you change the way you think, it changes the way you act. That's true repentance.
So after hearing that, I definitely think he's taken the right steps for those of us who found ourselves making massive mistakes. And more importantly, his mistakes should serve as a cautionary tale for those of us in ministry, myself included, and also for you who's watching this right now. Everyone wrestles with pride at some level, but it's sneaky. It takes work to see how our egos are operating in our lives because it hides itself from us, and we could easily think of a million excuses to justify it. So one way that I try to find pride in my own life is to pay attention to how much it impacts me when people recognize me for certain things, and also how it makes me feel slighted when people don't acknowledge me for those things. And here's the thing about it. Most of the time, these are good things like my channel, for example, but they create problems for us when we subconsciously start to see those things as our ultimate source of value and self-worth. When we get our ultimate value and self-worth from anything other than God, then those things are bound to destroy us. When we feel like we're valuable because we are living up to those things, then we allow them to make us arrogant. So as Carl learned, when this happens, we need to humble ourselves before God does it for us. And he does it for our benefit because we aren't designed to get our ultimate praise from ourselves, and that's why it's so damaging to us and others when we do. If you're like me, you're gonna get it wrong sometimes, and you're gonna make mistakes. mistakes. And so when we do, we also need to remember that when we are faithless, God is still faithful. We aren't saved because we are faithful and never mess up. We aren't saved because we're better than Carl Lentz or anyone else. And we aren't saved because we're more moral than anyone else. The only reason that we're saved is not because we are good, but only because He is good. And the more that we allow God to be the ultimate thing that we get our value from, the less likely we are to be slaves to our sinful instincts and our egos.